Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Connor and Haley lived in Charlotte, North Carolina, in a quiet neighborhood where the morning silence was broken only by the soft sounds of daily life. They'd been married for 11 years, and to anyone watching from the outside, they looked like the picture of a solid, unshakable relationship. Photos on social media showed couples trips, family lunches, birthdays with genuine smiles. But beyond the images, there were gestures, small daily habits only people who've lived together for a long time can develop effortlessly. Connor worked as an information technology coordinator at a local university. He was an organized, calm man, the kind who'd rather listen than speak. He spent his days surrounded by screens, spreadsheets, and systems, but his thoughts often drifted to Haley, especially when she was away on another work trip. Haley was a flight attendant with one of the country's largest airlines. She was proud of the career she'd built over the years. Her coworkers knew her for her punctuality, attention to detail, and natural friendliness that shone through even when she was tired. Traveling across the U.S., sometimes even beyond it, she spent days away from home. But every time she landed in Charlotte, she knew she'd come back to a space prepared just for her. Connor made sure everything was exactly how she liked it. He'd cook her favorite meal, adjust the lighting in the living room with warmer bulbs, play her playlist of calming music, and if it was cold, he'd already have the blanket laid out on the couch. Haley always said she felt like she was stepping into a private spa when she returned. It was Connor's quiet way of showing he missed her, no grand declarations, just gestures that left no doubt. Their connection was obvious. There were no arguments, no excessive demands. Conversations flowed naturally, and even when time was tight between trips, they knew how to make the most of it. Sometimes they'd eat dinner in silence, exchanging knowing glances. Other times, they'd watch old shows or simply walk hand in hand through the nearby park. It was a relationship built on solid ground. And that foundation seemed unshakable, until that particular night when Haley returned from a flight from Chicago. Connor had prepared everything as usual. A light dinner, a tidy house, a candle lit on the table. Haley arrived exhausted but smiling, and after her shower, she sat down with him on the couch. They chatted about small things. She told funny stories about passengers. He mentioned a system glitch at the university that had been a headache all day. Between laughs and affection, Haley moved closer, resting her head on his shoulder. She whispered something soft, almost like a compliment, but at the end of the sentence, she said the name Liam. For a moment, Connor thought he'd misheard. He straightened up, turned to face her, and asked, without changing his tone, "What did you say?" Haley looked up at him, hesitated for a second, then laughed lightly. She said it was an inside joke from the flight, something she'd heard from the cabin crew, and the name had just popped into her head. Connor smiled back, though something inside him had tightened. It wasn't just the name. It was the way she said it, the tone, the softness, the familiarity. Something he couldn't name, but that felt completely out of place. The night went on normally. They finished the wine, turned off the lights, and went to bed. But while Haley slept, worn out from another workday, Connor stayed awake longer than usual. His mind couldn't shake the feeling that something was off that night. The name. The smile she gave when explaining. The brief silence before answering. He had no proof, no concrete reason to suspect, but an uncomfortable seed had been planted. And without even realizing it, this would mark the beginning of a new phase in their lives, a phase where trust would slowly give way to doubt. The morning after the accidental mention of the name, Connor woke up with his mind still tangled. Haley was sleeping deeply beside him, and everything in the house looked just like any other day, but something inside had shifted. He tried to rationalize it, to convince himself he was overreacting, that the name could have just been a coincidence, a momentary slip like she said. Still, the unease grew like a background noise impossible to ignore. Over breakfast, he watched her movements more closely, the way she smiled, how she fiddled with her phone between conversations, how she avoided direct eye contact at times. Small things, but together, they created a sense of discomfort. When she left to run errands before her next shift, he allowed himself to go one step beyond doubt. He opened his laptop and began searching discreetly. Using the name he'd heard, he started with public websites, social media, crew forums. Liam Grayson. At first, nothing came up immediately. But when he cross-referenced the name with Haley's airline, a few records appeared. Photos from corporate events, mentions in posts about long-haul flights, comments from coworkers who referred to Liam in friendly contexts. He worked for the same company, that much was clear. Then Connor remembered Haley occasionally mentioning the flights she was scheduled on. He pulled up an old email she'd left open once and checked the crew list for a recent trip. There was his name. He opened 2 more records, and again, Liam Grayson appeared. Too much of a coincidence. Connor started listing dates and comparing them with Liam's public posts. It was like assembling an invisible puzzle, each piece revealing a little more of the picture he feared was forming. With every confirmation, his stomach twisted. And though nothing was explicit, the frequency with which their names appeared together on flight schedules spoke for itself. He wasn't looking for proof anymore, he was looking for certainty. On the night before Haley's next trip, she went into the bathroom saying she needed to relax before the next day. Connor sat on the edge of the bed, feeling the weight of the decision he was about to make. Her phone was on the dresser, locked. He knew the unlock pattern, the same one since they got married. He'd never used it before. But that night, doubt weighed heavier than respect. He entered the code with guilt, but also determination. When the screen lit up, he felt like an intruder. But he had no choice now. His hands were sweaty, his heart racing. He knew he was crossing a line, but the unease had been eating at him for days. He opened the messaging app and searched for Liam. The contact was there, with a plain emoji and a star, a personal, almost affectionate detail. The conversation was nearly empty, but not completely erased. There was a backup in iCloud. With his heart pounding, he accessed the backup. The messages appeared in chronological order. Most were short and practical: got here safely, see you on the next flight, missed that time. But one, sent 2 weeks earlier, froze him: it was harder than I thought to stay away from you. Last night, at the hotel, I thought about calling. But I know I can't. And Liam's reply: me too. Every time we're together, it feels like the world disappears. Be careful, love. We can't take risks. He didn't need anything else. The pain didn't come as anger, but as a deep emptiness, like the ground had opened beneath his feet. There was no other way to interpret it. It was a confession. It was intimacy. It was a real relationship, hidden between flight schedules and hotel rooms. Connor felt the world stop for a second. His fingers lost their grip, and he almost dropped the phone. His mind spun in circles, trying to process the impact of what he'd just seen. The certainty was real now. It wasn't just a feeling, or paranoia. It was betrayal. And it came from the person he trusted most. With the screen still glowing in his hands, he heard the water stop in the bathroom. Haley turned off the shower, unaware of what waited for her outside. Connor didn't move. He didn't yet know what he'd do, but he knew nothing would ever be the same. That moment marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. And the silence between one breath and the next already carried more pain than any scream. When Haley stepped out of the bathroom, wrapped in a towel, calmly drying her hair, she found Connor sitting on the edge of the bed. He didn't say anything at first, just lifted his gaze and showed her the laptop. The illuminated screen displayed the last message received, along with the full chat history pulled from the backup. Haley froze instantly, as if the air around her had changed temperature. For a second, she tried to pretend she didn't understand, but his eyes were fixed on her, filled with a silent pain that left no room for pretense. He asked in a controlled voice, not shouting, not dramatizing, just with the firmness of someone who no longer wants to hear vague excuses. Is it with him that you're cheating on me when you're traveling? She stayed frozen. Her eyes darted from the phone to his, then back to the screen. She tried to smile, as if searching for one last bit of lightness to turn things around, but nothing came. Only a weak murmur escaped her throat. It's not what you think. Connor stayed silent, waiting. Haley then sat down on the nearby armchair, her hands trembling. She said it was a mistake, that she never meant to hurt him, that it started innocently. That the conversations began in hallways, between exhausting shifts and idle hours in hotel rooms. That she felt lonely, vulnerable, and Liam appeared at the exact moment her defenses were weakest. Connor listened, but didn't react. The words entered like dull knives, slowly tearing him apart. She continued, now with tears in her eyes. She said it wasn't about love, that she never stopped loving Connor. That it was something happening behind the scenes of her life, far from home, far from the routine they'd built together. She begged for forgiveness, said she'd do anything. That she'd quit her job, cut ties with Liam, start over from scratch. That there was still time. But Connor only shook his head. His expression wasn't angry or furious. It was the look of someone who'd just seen something precious shatter on the floor. He said there was no going back. That the marriage, as he understood it, was over. That it wasn't just about physical betrayal, but about trust, respect, and choice. He stood up, placed the phone back on the dresser, and said firmly that he'd file for separation. That there was no more discussion. He also said he'd file a formal complaint with the airline. That this couldn't go unpunished, because beyond breaking a marriage, she'd violated ethical codes within her own workplace. Haley tried to protest, but he cut her off. His voice remained controlled, but there was a weight in every word that made any counterargument impossible. You made your choices. Now you have to live with them. The next morning, Haley got ready for another trip. Her movements were mechanical, as if her body was operating while her mind struggled to process everything that had happened in the past hours. Connor passed her in the hallway and said, without changing his tone, that when she returned from this trip, she wouldn't be able to call this place home anymore. That she should find another destination, another roof, another starting point. Haley just nodded. She knew insisting would be pointless. She grabbed her suitcase, walked out the door, and left, certain that when she returned, nothing would be the same. As soon as she was gone, Connor went to his office, turned on the computer, and started gathering everything he could access legitimately: public flight schedule records, flight dates, layover times that matched between Haley and Liam. No messages, no conversations. He knew the words from the phone couldn't be used. Not honestly. But he also knew the company had a right to know if its code of conduct was being violated. So he wrote an anonymous report through the internal channel, mentioned the names involved, and only indirect signs, unusual scheduling patterns, possible unauthorized shift swaps, and how often the two appeared together in records from affiliated hotels. He asked for an internal investigation based on official data and witness statements. When he clicked send, he didn't feel relief, just wait. It wasn't revenge. Nor was it full justice. It was simply an attempt to put the truth in front of those responsible, without turning himself into something he'd never been. He deleted the draft, closed the laptop, and for the first time, he cried. Not for her. But for the man he'd been, and still tried to be, even after everything. He didn't yet know what would come next, but he was certain he wouldn't accept less than he deserved. And in that moment, the silence in the house was different, heavy, thick, final. The report Connor filed triggered immediate action at the airline. The company's leadership reviewed the material carefully, and given the nature of the evidence, opened an internal investigation. The messages between Haley and Liam were analyzed, along with flight schedule records from the past several months. The airline, known for its strict protocols and conduct standards, handled the case with complete confidentiality but firmness. Shift timelines, flight reports, and witness statements began to be collected to determine whether the relationship had indeed taken place during work hours, a direct violation of company policy. Crew members were called in to testify. Some hesitated, others were direct. They reported that Haley and Liam always seemed to pick the same shifts, that they often shared hotel rooms during layovers, something unusual among crew. Security footage from affiliated hotels confirmed entries and exits at overlapping times, along with records of shared meals during rest periods. Small details began to fit together like pieces of an uncomfortable puzzle. This wasn't just an affair outside work, it was a connection happening within their work hours, in the time and space when both were supposed to be focused on their operational duties. The internal process moved forward with rigor, but at the bureaucratic pace expected in a large company. In the first days, Haley and Liam were temporarily removed from flight schedules while the investigation continued. Both received official notices and had the right to submit written defenses and name witnesses. A few days after the report, the verdict was announced. Both were terminated for violating the professional code of conduct. The statement was clear: personal relationships weren't forbidden, but using company resources for intimate relationships, combined with manipulated schedules, constituted a breach of ethics and trust. The notice included a clause barring them from returning to the company indefinitely. The news hit both of them hard. Haley, with years of an unblemished career, felt the ground vanish beneath her. Liam, on the other hand, tried to downplay it, saying they'd find other opportunities. The truth, however, was that the civil aviation industry didn't tolerate this kind of exposure. Unemployed and with their professional reputations damaged, they decided to try turning the relationship into something real. Haley couldn't go back to Connor's house, so she accepted Liam's invitation to move into his small rented apartment in the Raleigh area. At first, they seemed convinced they could start over. They made plans, split expenses, believed that now, without secrets, they could build something honest. But daily life revealed cracks that the travel and escape scenarios had masked. Liam was disorganized, impulsive, and showed little interest in stability. Haley, meanwhile, carried guilt, the weight of her fall, and longing for what she'd lost. Small conflicts arose in the first days, intensified in the following weeks. Arguments about money, different habits, the future. What once seemed like a strong connection now showed signs of wear, incompatibility, even boredom. The attraction between them had clearly been tied to secrecy, to the forbidden, to the hidden. Without the sparkle of flight schedules and hotel rooms, all that remained was raw routine, stripped of any decoration. In a short time, the relationship completely fell apart. Haley tried to keep the peace, suggested they seek help, find a way forward. But Liam already showed constant irritation, lack of interest, and eventually, coldness. One ordinary morning, he left for a job interview and didn't return until the next day. When he came back, he said he needed space. Haley understood. She packed her things in silence, no arguing, no crying, no asking for explanations. The pain was now more internal than external. She no longer had the strength to humiliate herself for anyone. With no options, no job, no relationship, and no home, Haley made a call she'd been putting off for months. Her mother's voice, firm but without judgment, said only, "The room is ready." She took a flight to Portland, Oregon, the city where she grew up, where the smell of pine trees still reminded her of childhood. This wasn't a fresh start. It was shelter. She was greeted with some awkwardness, like someone returning defeated from a war they never should have fought. Her teenage bedroom was there, untouched, a cruel reminder of everything she'd left behind. Her promising career, her devoted husband, her stability. Now it all seemed distant, like a life that no longer belonged to her. And even without knowing what came next, she fully understood she was only beginning to face the real consequences of her choices. Days in Portland started slowly for Haley. Every morning, the alarm went off, but there was no flight scheduled, no uniform to wear, no airport in sight. At first, she still believed she could quickly re-enter the job market. She updated her resume, prepared recommendation letters with contacts she still had in the field, and began applying to airlines across different states. Some didn't respond at all, others politely declined. The few that showed interest stopped the process as soon as they learned she'd been let go from her last company for conduct violations. Her record weighed like an anchor. Her name, once synonymous with professionalism, now came with suspicion. Frustrated and with her self-esteem shattered, Haley looked for alternatives. She tried to reinvent herself. She used her experience to launch a YouTube channel, Life in the Air, the Other Side of the Uniform. She posted videos about flight routines, passenger care, career tips. At first, she got few views. But a video about emotional exhaustion in aviation went viral. In it, she spoke honestly about pressure, loneliness during layovers, and the risks of losing yourself along the way. Some viewers recognized her. Comments like "cheater" and "bad example" started appearing. But others said, "I've never heard anyone speak so honestly about this job. It wasn't a career. It wasn't a school. But it was a start." The audience was modest, mostly young dreamers just starting out. Haley taught with skill, but without enthusiasm. Every lesson felt like a reminder of what she'd lost. At night, she'd return to her parents' house and often lock herself in her room, staring at the old photos she still kept saved on her phone. Pictures with Connor, memorable flights, records of a life that now seemed to belong to someone else. Connor, meanwhile, went through difficult weeks after Haley's final departure. The emptiness in the house was real, but also necessary. Slowly, he regained control of his routine. He threw himself into work, reorganized projects at the university, got involved in new initiatives, and accepted invitations to gatherings he used to decline. He made time to reconnect with old friends, have lunch with colleagues, rebuild relationships. The marriage, despite no visible crises, had gradually let fade. Conversations with family became more frequent, and he began leaning on the emotional support of people who truly cared. The separation process moved forward legally. Haley didn't contest the asset division, nor did she try to reclaim the house. Connor handled everything discreetly, handing documents to his lawyer and attending hearings calmly. When the decision was finalized, he felt a quiet relief. It wasn't happiness, nor celebration. It was just a necessary closure. A firm period placed at the end of a long sentence filled with deception and disappointment. Now, each walked their own path. Haley kept up with her courses, but she knew this new career wasn't born from a dream, but from consequence. It was like walking down a side road after being forced off the main one. Invitations were scarce, the audience shrinking, and her name no longer carried respect in the industry. The trust that once surrounded her had faded, and even as she tried to rebuild, she carried the weight of closed doors. Each new day reminded her that the past still demanded its price. Connor, on the other hand, hadn't forgotten. But he was rebuilding. He wasn't chasing a new love, nor trying to replace what he'd lost. He was just taking care of himself. He remodeled parts of the house, replaced the living room furniture, painted the bedroom, slowly changed his routine. The pain was still there, but it had lessened. The silence wasn't suffocating anymore. It was space where he could hear his own voice, make plans, think about the future without guilt. What began as an unexpected breakup was now becoming a chance to start over. And even without rushing, he knew he was already on the right path. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.